Hey, welcome back to the Sapient Podcast. We have the Strong Sistas. This is Ash and Sarah Armstrong. They're great people. I connected them with online a long time ago. They have a great Instagram account. They are nose to tail enthusiasts. They eat animals nose to tail. They're not afraid to eat meat. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I was so impressed with these girls. They're such great role models for everyone, but really for young females all around the world. I think we live in a time where meat is vilified, and they are finding their health. They've gone through a health journey that they've shared with publicly, finding the nose to tail approach to be very, very effective for them. And they're not just carnivores; they also use plant foods in an effective and a thoughtful way. And furthermore, they're now starting a farm, and they're going to try to promote regenerative agriculture practices. And I can't think of two young women that are more inspirational and motivating. And we're lucky to have them on this show.
Yeah, I think it's a really good one. And got to tell you how this show is possible. Sapient.org, we have the Sapient program. So we help you go on your health journey, and we teach you everything because the information is out there, but it's not easy to do. We kind of show you why you're doing this or how to implement it into your lifestyle. And we have videos, we have written information, we have a health coach, Coach Becker. You can even ask us questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a great place to start or a place to take your journey to the next level. And we're really proud of it. And we also have something called the Sapient Tribe, which is exactly what it sounds like, a community of people, ourselves, other like-minded individuals that support each other, educate each other, share stories with each other. We give extra content on there. We're available through Zoom calls and a variety of other kind of ways to access us and our team. And I think it's a great way for anyone that is interested in what we're doing to get connected with us.
And that's both are at sapient.org. And also we have Evolve Healthcare. So if you're in the LA area or you're not, Dr. Gary here has your back. You can have a good doctor that actually understands this modern health and not this outdated health idea. And you can do remote visits if you're not in LA, or if you're in LA, hey, drive over. You have people drive an hour to see you.
From all over Southern California. It's such a blessing. And for anyone who's interested in eating a sapient diet and lifestyle, what better way to get really healthy meat is to use Mr. Bryan's nosetotale.org. He has partnered with really, really impressive regenerative agriculture farmers. He's providing the highest quality meats, grass-fed beef, pasture-raised pork, and a lot of really exciting products like Primal Light, which is an organ meat blend, which I use all the time to get some really nutrient-dense foods in your diet. He's got other products like skincare products coming out that are all natural, animal-based products. And if you've never tried a food delivery service, or if you have and you want the highest quality food, please check out nosetotale.org.
All right, thanks, Gary. And now let's take it to the Strong Sistas. We'll start. We're recording.
Okay.
Too much pre-talk over here. How are you all doing? Where are y'all at?
Doing well. We are in Central Illinois, kind of wrapping things up here with a few projects and my degree, and then we'll be moving a little bit up north to Southwest Michigan to start our farm. So we'll be staying in the Midwest area.
Great. And can you say your names for each girl?
Yes. So we have Sarah, Ashley, and we are sisters.
The Strong Sistas on Instagram. Look them up.
Where did the name come from? I love the name.
Our last name is Armstrong, and so also we pride ourselves in being relatively strong for our size. So we kind of just piece that together. We've been doing like powerlifting for quite some time, and so just naturally somehow stumbled upon Strong and Sistas. It was what was available on Instagram at the time.
Well, it's great. Yeah, you guys look great. You look strong. How do you describe yourself? Like, what do you do for a living? Like, what is your goal in life?
So that has really, there's been a lot of self-reflection during the quarantine time. And that future has definitely changed. And we've really been honest with ourselves and our passions and what we actually want to do. So if you would have asked me that in 2019, I would have said, I want to be a professor and have my own research lab and start my own research projects. I think that I've gradually like over time, I've really just accepted that my true passion is regenerative agriculture. I like get so distracted with learning about soil and soil health. And in 2020, I just said, I'm not going to push that passion aside anymore. And I like want to chase it. So Sarah and I are very fortunate that we are at a position in our lives where we can stop everything and start a farm this fall once I finish my degree. And then we're also working on like some side projects and then like a cookbook with Dr. Paul Saladino. So taken like a big turn in our life. We have zero farming experience. We've like volunteered at some local farms. But yeah, two sisters.
So if we were to describe ourselves, it'd be wannabe farmers.
Yeah. Wannabe farmers.
Summary.
I think we're all wannabe farmers, kind of. Dr. Gary and I kind of are. We talked about that for a brief second. I mean, I think it'd be great to, as we get older, maybe Dr. Gary finishes his medical career or moves it online somehow. And, maybe it's possible to do out on a farm.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, one more thing. In addition to like being passionate about regenerative agriculture and soil health, we are also just like extremely passionate about finding like optimal health. And so we developed autoimmune conditions a few years ago. And rather than like taking prescription medications that were prescribed to us, we decided to take our health into our own hands. So about 4-ish years ago, we really started to kind of look into alternative health options such as fasting and keto. And that's what led us to carnivore. And while we fixed some things that we were dealing with, we still didn't address like our amenorrhea and some hormonal issues. And so that's kind of the journey that we're on right now, is fixing and optimizing our female hormones, which just weren't necessarily fixed while going low or zero carb carnivore.
Yeah, that's good. Before Dr. Gary gets in here, just some more context is, I started checking you guys out online a while back because you just got into this space, you got into the health space. We're all in this health, like alternative health space, take nutrition and health into your own hands. And I saw you two doing that, and you went on your own journey, and it started, really nose to tail carnivore, and then you switched. And that's part of the story too, is so many people, they go online publicly and they do these things, and then everyone thinks you're in this for life and you can't change your mind. And it's really weird how people get in their little groups and tribes and camps, and they don't want to see people change their minds. So we're going to get into all that, but maybe we can get Dr. Gary a little intro here.
Well, yeah, I'm excited to talk to you guys. One of the things that comes to mind as you tell me your story is that, even just a few years ago, no one was talking about farming. I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, no one was talking about farming. And if you look at the, how many young people are going into farming, no young people are going into farming. And I think that what's interesting is there's been a plant-based movement for quite a long time now, and that wasn't driving people into farming. But all of a sudden, you have a carnivore movement, you have this low carb movement, you have people figuring out that, regenerative agriculture and beef is good, and there's a right way to raise animals. And now all of a sudden, you have these young girls opening a farm, which is, to me, amazing, and especially during this time, it's inspiring, and it shows me a brighter future. So I commend you guys for doing that, and really, I think it reflects so well on our community of alternative medicine, which I don't really think it is, but I guess you said you always had a passion for regenerative agriculture. Where did that start? Is that something that you guys grew up with? Is that something that you came to you as you are going through your health journey? Because for me, like, I just figured it out. Like, I started working with Brian maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, and it was like a light bulb went off, and now all of a sudden I want to join you guys in your farm in Michigan and let me plow some soil with you. You know what I'm saying? So how did that come about?
So I would say it is relatively recent passion too. I think going through carnivore and the whole nose to tail journey made us realize how important it is to use the whole animal and to consume animals that were raised humanely. And then looking deeper into that and going to visit local farmers, we learned all about everything that holistically managed animals do for the environment. So everything they're doing for the soil.
I would note, like, before we got into carnivore, we were definitely very plant-based because we do care about animal welfare, right? Like, we do care about the planet. And so we thought at the time, oh, I need to just eat more plants, less red meat. And that's better for the environment. And so learning about carnivore and the health benefits, and then we realized, oh, there's actually like a really cool way of doing carnivore, and that's supporting your local farmer and doing regenerative agriculture. And then you just go down this huge rabbit hole. And so last summer we did, like, we called it Tour Day Local Farms. And so we visited all the local farmers in our area, got a ton of good grass-fed meat. And we just like learned so much from those farmers, and they were so passionate and so willing to share everything because like they're doing good things. They're not hiding anything. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we're so grateful that we went through this carnivore journey. We would not have learned about regenerative agriculture without it.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah. And I also did integrative nutrition when I was like transitioning away from my undergrad degree. And I learned a lot about like biodynamic farming. And I think just piecing those things together, I realized like there's more to just not eating animals. Like that really isn't the answer. It's not, you have to do both. You have to holistically raise your plants and animals and put it together. And I just feel like getting more and more, our mission now is like making more young people realize that, to hopefully just stop thinking that veganism is the only route.
Because we grew up in the suburbs, right? So we grew up on the south side of Chicago. If anyone's familiar with the grocery stores in the area, Jewel Osco was our store. And so we just assumed like you go to the grocery store to get your meat, to get your vegetables. And we never developed that connection with where our food came from.
Yeah.
And that's our passion and goal now is like, you should know where your food comes from. And like, if we all want this regenerative agriculture movement to succeed, Dr. Gary, we got to get you on the land as soon as possible. We got to get as many regenerative farmers out there, because it's not going to work with just a few farmers, right? The more people we can get out on the land, the better that we're all going to succeed with the goal.
Yeah.
Well, just speaking to your point, it's all of us, right? It's young people getting out on the farm and being online and showing people how to do it. It's young people starting podcasts and sharing that message. And also it's young doctors like teaching people this. This is all I do in my clinic. I talk about, healthy food acquisition, if you will, like plants, animals, whatever, doing it in a thoughtful way and a healthy way, and thinking more than just, what I'm going to have for dinner, but where did that food come from, and how does it feed my body? And that's so much of what I do. I was talking to Brian before our podcast, how like the most challenging patients are, and just happens to be this way, are just young girls. Young girls are really struggling. The same issues that you guys have brought up on your social, and probably we can talk about today, things like amenorrhea, hormone issues, issues with getting pregnant. This is so common. And, in my clinic, I have all this experience now getting people onto our Sapient diet platform, and things turn around and people do so much better. And the biggest challenge for me is I don't have anyone to show them. There's a Sean Baker out there. There's a Paul Saladino out there. There's a Brian Sanders. It's true, right? Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of Strong Sistas. There's not a lot of young girls that have really embraced this. So I commend you guys. It's really going to help a lot of people for you guys to be out there and sharing your story.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to bring up the Biggest Little Farm too. That was a film that came out that's about this process. It's not just plants or animals. It's using them together. It's this biodynamic kind of way of doing things. And I'm glad there's more films coming out like that. Sacred Cow, Food Lies is going to touch on this as well. And also want to talk about making farming cool again. I had a lot of podcasts with these great ranchers doing great things. I just reached out to Joel Salatin. I went to film with him, and he's great. Try to get him on the show. I know you guys have visited White Oak Pastures a couple times with Paul, and I think the solution to all this mess we're in is making farming cool again. Is that we have this new technology, right? Everyone's worried about, what's going to happen when all the truck drivers don't have jobs, and we have technology that takes a lot of occupations away. Well, if we go back to farming ourselves, that's a good job. That is, you feel good about it, right? You get satisfaction from doing something, and it should be a great thing that we think is cool, right? I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's just, let's embrace it. Let's make it awesome.
So I would take that statement, making farming cool again. I take it a step further, because right now you think about like a lot of the regenerative agriculture leaders. I don't mean this any offense by this, but they're all like older males.
Yeah.
Right. So Will Harris, Joel Salatin, Gabe Brown,
Greg Judy.
So like
Alan
what
Safin.
young females are going to, what young females are going to relate to them? So let's make farming sexy again. See what I'm saying?
They're all sexy.
Or,
They're all
What's
and
that
eating
girl
red
about
meat
Brian?
sexy again. Let's make red meat
Tara?
sexy again.
Absolutely.
We had Michaela Peterson in the studio. We filmed with her a little bit for the film. She's just like, why not go on? It's not ladylike to just go and eat a steak on a date. Let's make that like a cool thing for a girl to do. We have like Christy Storshek on, she works with us at Sapient. Let's make, she went from that vegan route. She had some of the same things, the amenorrhea and stuff. And, you go down the wrong pathway. So what I've seen in clinic too with Dr. Gary is the girls come in and they're just scared to eat meat.
And that brings me to a question here. Okay, so we're talking about this kind of endpoint. I think probably this is where you guys are headed. You have this farm and you're really becoming an inspiration. But you guys were talking about being, pretty plant-based and having a lot of health issues. What was the thing that, I would talk about this a lot. I had an argument with Brian roughly 4 years ago after I finished my training about nutrition. He put a bug in my head. That bug festered. I started reading, and all of a sudden I've changed my entire, recommendations and how I take care of patients, frankly, at least from a nutritional lifestyle standpoint. What was the thing, you guys, that made that like really clicked you to change your perspective?
So I remember the exact day. So we, like I mentioned, we tried to take our health into our own hands. So we got into like keto and fasting. And so we were listening to some of, have you heard of Sim Land?
Yeah.
So we listened to a lot of his podcasts back in the day. And then he had Paul Saladino on like March 2019 or so. And that podcast was like what made me kind of change my mind. Like a lot of things just started to click.
On what, meat or?
On meat, and incorporating more meat and going carnivore. Paul, as you guys know, Paul just has a really good way of he's just a really good science communicator. So he has a way of explaining complex topics that's easy to digest for people to just understand. And so I think that podcast, and then I'm really grateful that we're still really good friends with him, because he was someone that was a huge influence in us going from more of a plant-based to full carnivore and now just animal-based.
But I think in terms of what experiences we went through that made us change is we spent a long time, we've always been conscious of our health, growing up, always aware of I needed to exercise, I needed to eat clean. At that time, it was relatively low fat.
Brown rice.
So I thought that was healthy. We did a lot of if it fits your macros. So I've always known protein, fats, carbs.
Yeah.
And to go through that all of my teens, to be the only one of my friends understanding what I'm eating, and yet I wind up at age 19 with an autoimmune condition. At that point, I was really fed up and I was willing to do anything. So although I was largely eating plant-based, it obviously wasn't working for me if I was going to have blood results indicating that I'm going to be sick eventually. And so we were just really willing to make any sort of change, even if that meant doing a 24-hour fast, which before that I would have been I have to eat every X amount of hours. And so it was just realizing that nothing else has worked. So you have to do the opposite.
Was the first thing keto intermittent fasting? Because it sounds like that you guys explored that world a little bit before you jumped into carnivore, right?
We started with just carb-based and then intermittent fasting. And we were listening to a lot of Ben Bikman. No, not Bikman. Not Ben Bikman. The bodybuilder. Ben Pakulski. We were listening to a lot of his podcasts, and he was getting into fasting. So we would do daily fasting, but we would be switching from fat for fuel and carbs for fuel every single day. And that was a rough transition. So then that kind of led us straight into keto. But when we were keto, we were still very much plant-based. If you look at our plates, it was taste the rainbow. So we've got a ton of cabbage, a ton of bok choy, using beans and legumes and stuff like that for our proteins. And we would really only have eggs.
They pay no attention to anti-nutrients.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Or pesticides and all the junk that they put on our plants.
Exactly.
Well, okay, so tell us more about the health problems you're having and then how they resolved or new things made it popped up.
Okay, so I think for me, my autoimmune condition was manifesting like really externally. So I had very poor circulation. My hands were really puffy and purple all the time. I was always cold. Hands and feet always cold. I would have like skin rashes, even though I've like always tried to do my best with taking care of my skin. So a lot of things I just like didn't understand why. Like I felt like this was really unfair.
The butterfly rashes.
And then just other things like I think everybody experiences this, but like fatigue, like chronic constipation, just things that like you are told are relatively normal that like we all go through, but at a certain point it really reduces your quality of life. And I was starting to experience a lot of depression about it. And so I think hers were relatively similar.
I was dealing with a lot of like panic attacks and insomnia. So mine was kind of manifesting mentally. We both got blood work done and our ANA levels were elevated. Hers were higher than mine. And so her doctor told her, here, just take these prescription meds and you'll just one day get lupus and there's not really much you can do about it. Just try to reduce the amount of inflammation as much as you can. You probably shouldn't exercise and you probably shouldn't go in the sun. So that's kind of what we were told.
Wait, yeah, you're not, apparently for autoimmune condition patients, the sun is your enemy.
Some of the recommendations that my colleagues give for autoimmune is mind-blowing to me, and their willingness to prescribe, these drugs, which are totally safe, by the way, to give for an autoimmune condition, but God forbid we use them for COVID, speaking towards hydroxychloroquine. I'm just saying, right, there's a lot of this like bizarre use of drugs that I use medications. I'm an internal medicine doctor. I don't mind using medications, but it has to make some sense. So that's insane to me that that's what they recommended on a positive ANA. Did you have any other markers? Positive rheumatoid factor?
C3 and C4.
Yeah, my C3 has always been, I think, is elevated or low, whichever one is more towards lupus.
Yeah.
And that was really it besides my symptoms. And my rheumatologist, she didn't say anything about my diet or my lifestyle, which at that time I really didn't put two and two together, because it's not only until you get into this alternative space that you meet people like Brian and yourself who are like, hey, no, like pay attention to this first, don't just take a medication. And so I didn't think anything of it.
Shocking.
Well, it's just, I think that another thing that really helped us was like getting out of the mindset of normal society where people just are like, oh yeah, like you're at the age, you're in your 20s. So like these symptoms are just going to come. They're natural. Like a lot of people get autoimmune conditions these days. Like it's just going to happen to you.
I think they're just largely undiagnosed.
That as well. But then going into this like space on social media and realizing that like, oh, there's a lot of people that are trying to fix their issues with food. And like, as simple as that sounds, like, why isn't that discussed enough in other communities? It was just, that was also kind of eye-opening.
And that's why I don't like to call us alternative medicine, because it's not alternative medicine to eat healthy and think about things other than drugs. There's a great story that we don't need to get into on this podcast of how we've generated Western medicine, starting in the early 1900s. And it was all driven to give people drugs, make money on distributing drugs. And I think that, now we're really seeing the downstream effects of it by normalizing disease. And that's what you guys are describing, the normalization of feeling shitty. Like it's not acceptable.
I should show my shirt. It's health over healthcare.
I love it. That's great.
That's what
nice, Brian.
We've always done in the past. And, health was natural. And then, there's certain interests came in and made it about money. And it's no wonder. It's the same thing with the COVID stuff. Why aren't they talking about this? I posted a Bill Maher video talking about this that was the most popular thing I've ever posted. And because it was this message of why are we not talking about health? Why didn't the health officials, all these government people, talk about you could go home and change your life? You can go out in the sun and exercise and change your diet and lose weight and become less immunocompromised. And that's instead they said just sit at home and wear a mask. It's very obvious that there's something going on with these messages? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Well,
That's crazy.
It's interesting, the parallel between your autoimmune conditions or people's chronic medical conditions that they deal with, and then how we are managing this infectious disease, and how it's the solutions are the same essentially, but they don't present that solution. They only present alternative solutions that are driven by corporate dollars, and that's become so clear to everyone, whatever side of the political scheme you're on. I think it's pretty clear that this is about making money and not about our health. And I think our generation, young people, are just like, I think you guys would agree, I refuse to be a 6-7-year-old. I don't want to be withering away in a nursing home because, I have like terrible, metabolic state and my hormones are all destroyed and I haven't used my body for 50 years, but that's what I see every day.
Yeah. I think that something that isn't discussed enough is how this is all linked to soil health too. So like you have people in the biopharmaceutical industry that want people to use their drugs, right? Like that's how they get money continuously, is people buying the drugs. Biopharm is connected to big agriculture. Big agriculture is encouraging farmers, in convincing farmers that they have to use fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides. Like that's what you have to do this day and age to produce food. Those didn't exist 100, 150 years ago. And so those two links, they're causing an even bigger reliance on biopharmaceuticals because we are all obese and malnourished because our soil health is so crappy. And so it's just those parallels, they're literally running the same timeline. Like the introduction of drugs and the introduction of like after World War II and everything with like the industrialization and conventional agriculture practices. It's just like we are creating food that is doesn't have nutrients. And that even includes vegetables these days and plants, that's why I think so many people experience so many benefits on carnivore, is because like meat is so nutrient dense, but like processed foods and healthy foods are just nutrient devoid. So one example that we like to bring up is like oranges in this day and age have like 8 times less nutrients than they did like 100 years ago. So that means that you would have to consume 8 times the amount of oranges to achieve the same nutrient level. That's 8 times the number of calories. We don't need more calories as humans. And so that link, I don't think is discussed enough. And it's like really scary to think about.
That's so important because soil seems like the most boring topic. So my worst performing podcast was a soil expert. It was, maybe I should have put it in the title because it sounds boring, but I thought it was amazing. I read this guy's books, David Montgomery. He wrote, I forget the name of his books, but it's all about soil. And it's the base of everything. And I like Dr. Ted Naiman too. Some of his stuff touches on this, of showing that from the base level is the nutrients. It all comes from the soil, and then it goes up to the plants, and then it goes up to the animals. And it's this great, hierarchy, and it's this great system. And he's not saying we have to only eat from the top of the system, but I like that he's pointing out that where it all comes from the bottom, just like minerals. And he's another mechanical engineer. We were talking about mechanical engineering. We got a couple of mechanical engineers here that, I don't know, maybe it's just a systems approach, thinking about things from these deep levels. Sounds like what you're doing.
Yeah. And it's like, so this reliance on these like fertilizers, people don't realize that like NPK fertilizer is pretty much applied at like every single farm, even organic farms. And that's like cheap, easy nutrients for the plants. And so the plants don't work as hard. They don't photosynthesize as much. They don't pull as much carbon from the atmosphere and push it into the soil. And that results in getting less nutrients from like important fungi in the soil. And so I think this idea of like NPK fertilizer is necessary. Well, it's really only providing us with a limited set of nutrients. We're not tapping into these really deep nutrient stores that still exist in the soil. It's just we've lost that plant fungi relationship because we're just applying synthetic fertilizer. It's so frustrating. And that's kind of, we want to try to make that soil conversation fun because like you said, your podcast wasn't that popular about it, but like soil is king. It's so sad what has happened to it these last 100 years or so.
Don't put that in the title.
Oh, we're not gonna
Soil
do
is
this, though.
king. So you're saying you're not going to cover all your plants in Roundup?
Oh,
At
I
your
have to
new
say,
farm? No, yeah. Well, that's a whole
Yeah.
nother topic too, and the gut microbiome and how that affects everything. It's interesting. The most complex systems are what it comes down to. Like the soil, I was gonna do a presentation for KetoCon, but it didn't happen this year, and it was gonna be on these topics and how the most complex systems in the world are kind of the human brain, the gut, and the soil system. Like these, and there's these webs that are all interconnected, and we don't understand all those three things that much. Now we're starting to understand more of these things like you're talking about, that if you just give plants cheap nutrients, you can't cheat nature, right? You're trying to bypass the system with
Wow.
external inputs, and then it screws up this whole web that
Yep.
is the soil.
Yep.
I might argue though, or one might argue though, that we do understand it, and it's just in the last 150 years that we have lost our way because we have emphasized we've incentivized the wrong things, and instead of thinking about our planet and our health and living somewhat connected to our ancestry, we completely disconnected. It's TV dinners, plastic wrap this, just the corporatization of food and medicine, and through that process we've lost our way. It's frustrating, and what I always talk about is that as a physician, everything we just talked about should be at least discussed on some level, so that a doctor can give some recommendation, have some perspective. And I heard none of this throughout my entire training process. And so that kind of leads me to this question for you guys. What was your experience with physicians? I mean, other than, your rheumatologist told you to do, take medicine, stay out of the sun. Once you found carnivore, once you found this approach, did you guys get pushback? Did you even see physicians? What was that experience like?
Yeah. So as a grad student here, I get like free healthcare, and I can have like doctor's appointments at our university clinic.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to get blood work every once in a while just to check on things. And you can imagine a lean, active female on a zero carb diet, what my LDL cholesterol was. So like I received a lot of pushback from some of the doctors here at my clinic that I was kind of destroying my health. My LDL cholesterol, my unhealthy cholesterol was way too high, even though my HDL was like over 100 and my triglycerides were like 50 or below.
Oh my God.
So
That's
definitely
amazing.
definitely some misunderstanding on the like certain blood markers, which was kind of frustrating. But having relationships with like some doctors, like in this, I'm not going to call it alternative health sphere, I'm going to call it real health sphere. Having relationships with them and discussing some of these things was comforting, and knowing that like I wasn't headed down the right path. But if I didn't have that, I would have received I literally have an email saying like, you need to add more plants into your diet. You need to eat less red meat, and you need to reduce your fat consumption to lower your LDL. And so I can imagine like someone else who didn't have this experience in this other community would be like, oh, okay, yeah, like my cholesterol is way too bad, like high, it's bad. I'm like ruining my health going this other direction.
I mean, so this is something we talk about a lot between the two of us, is like, there's got to be so much confusion for people out there, because you have these little Instagram communities who like preach one way of eating, but then like you take a step out of that and there's so many of them, and they all are like 100% like it's this way or no other way. And then you have your doctor, and then even my naturopathic doctor who I went to after my rheumatologist before finding carnivore, she had similar recommendations of like, she never really prioritized nose to tail red meat eating. It was more of like, eat goji berry for this nutrient, and like ridiculous things. And then also supplement things like vitamin D. She basically just provided me with supplements that I would of course buy from their store that were making up for my like deficiencies on my blood work. But that's even more complex, because then we talked to Morley Robbins, who's the founder of the Root Cause Protocol, and he talks a lot about iron overload and all these mineral deficiencies. And again, it stems from a largely poor soil without any copper. And he's like, vitamin D is a horrible supplement. So like, there's so many like different views on it. It's just like, how does somebody navigate this, especially somebody who like doesn't have any training like you guys, who you guys can actually go in and read the research yourself and understand it. But if somebody can't, then like they're at the liberty of like whatever they're reading on Instagram. And it's so unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem. But I mean, you had your own journey too, which is good to have you guys do it out in public, and it's changing. So I like that, where I never got into some little dogmatic camp. Like I've never said I was carnivore. I never even said I was keto. You know, I'm like, yes, I'm fat adapted and I like to, you know, have this fat burning metabolism, but I'm not like a keto, like diehard, like let's be keto forever person. I'm not like a carnivore person, but yeah, well, tell us more about your journey too. Just going from, I mean, did you heal? Like, was it a good experience doing your nose to tail carnivore?
Oh, like I said, we learned about regenerative agriculture. We learned about like, I think how to have one of the most sustainable diets out there, which is a nose to tail approach. Because some people complain about how carnivore can be expensive. Yeah, if you're just buying ribeyes and expensive like muscle meat cuts, but like if you're incorporating all parts of the animals, that like price can significantly drop. So we've definitely learned a lot about like the best type of sourcing and the sustainability side.
I think anytime you make a change in your diet, like you're gonna see some difference. Like even if you do something that like, even if you remove red meat and you go to a vegan diet, like something's gonna change and you're probably gonna feel better than what you were doing before. And so I think that is what people get lost in. And I think we got lost in that too. So when we first went to, which by the way, good job never being like, I'm keto, because it's really hard to dig your way out of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like people unfollow you, they send you hate messages.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe it. So when we initially went keto, we obviously became fat adapted. So automatically started feeling better there. We went carnivore, is even better. We removed the bok choy. We removed all the green vegetables we weren't cooking properly. Obviously reduced inflammation there. And then now we're on a completely different journey because again, we played with a lever and we didn't pay attention to another one. So we trained really hard. We needed more carbs for our training. We were training fasted. We lost our periods. Hormones were really bad. So again, it's just like playing with those levers. But I think that now we've come to realize that it's not so much like necessarily like how are you carb fueled, fat fueled, but it's more like what food are you actually eating? Where are you sourcing it from? Like, are you paying attention to that? Are you hitting your nutrients? And then like, does your intake match your activity levels? I think that's just so much more important than somebody getting caught up in like, I'm keto, you know, because then you get lost in like, oh, what can I eat if I'm keto? And then you can find yourself doing the like, hey, let's do some dirty keto. Like there's just so many rabbit holes like that.
I also think another huge like benefit of carnivore is you remove any stressors on your gut, right? And people underestimate like how much of an impact that has on all bodily functions. So our focus now is so we have now added carbs. And our focus now is
carbs. Well, tell people, kind of carbs.
Whole food carbs. So
it's the same focus as the Sapient diet, where you really pay attention to the anti-nutrients. You don't have anything that's going to like necessarily harm your gut.
But one difference is we do incorporate fructose sources, and so that's I think a disagreement point there, but that's fine. We incorporate raw honey, fruit, fresh squeezed orange juice, and dairy as our carbohydrate sources. And then on occasion, we'll have like squash and well-cooked potatoes. Our main focus is carbohydrate sources that are very easy to digest because we have had a lot of digestion issues in the past. And so we have found that with this approach, our like digestion system is working really, really well. I think we were incorporating a lot of dark green cruciferous vegetables in the past, and those weren't working well on our digestive system. So that's where I think someone who gets really trapped in keto, they'll say, oh, those veggies, like that's keto, so I can stay below a certain carb threshold, but completely forget about like, oh, that's causing a lot of like digestion stress inside your system. And so really our main focus right now is using animal products for our fat and protein sources. And then for our carbohydrate sources, making those really easy to digest with low anti-nutrients. And I think that we have really felt good with the fruit, raw honey, milk and occasional squashes and well-cooked potatoes.
It's influenced by Dr. Ray Peat, if you looked into his work. And so he has the same ideas as you, where like low anti-nutrients, what's easy to digest, how are you going to get your nutrients in? And then from there, he never actually says like, you have to have a whole bunch of carbs. It's just like, his mindset on it is that the carbohydrates are stress relieving for your body, especially if they're easy to digest. And so you have to look at the position that we were in, where we lost our periods and we needed to dig our way out of that hole. So it's not like we're saying everybody should eat this way. It's more so like, what is your situation? Where's your activity level? Where are your hormones? And then design something for yourself from there.
That's so huge. Where you're at, your activity level. So
Yeah.
It's so funny because I said in a recent podcast, we gave someone like a marathoner's like diet. Like if you do marathons, that's what the food pyramid is. Like eat, and it's like these people are sitting at desks all day. You're giving, or like a bodybuilder diet, like eat 6 times a day, eat all the carbs. Yeah, if you're a bodybuilder or marathoner, not if you're like a fat guy like doing computer work. So you two are different. You are active and you are really lean. And it's no surprise that, you lost your period and they had some hormone issues. So there's a lot of context, which is huge. And also just, Gary, you step in. Sorry.
What you guys said, I use all of these little components with different people. And I think the challenge that I've taken on is making that individualized approach. Like for some people, honestly, keto does work. Yeah. And kind of jumping into that space works. For other people, they need the deep dive into the anti-nutrients and digestibility of carbs and understanding that. Other people, I present acute versus chronic stress, and sort of what you guys are saying. If sometimes you have all these acute stressors of like fasting and exercise, and you need some of these carbs to kind of like push your body and give yourself some relief. So there's so many pieces to what we're talking about here. And I think that these podcasts and so much of what we do is about bringing those subtleties to light.
Well, I hope like it's really refreshing to see a doctor who works with patients who's actually having this conversation. I don't think besides Dr. Paul, I've ever really, come into contact with one. So that's amazing. Who actually has an open mindset and isn't like keto, carnivore, vegan. Like you're like, no, it's what you need. Just pay attention to where your food comes from. And that's huge. It's taken us years to find that.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that approach because we have seen a lot of young females come into the carnivore space and try to adopt the exact way that Sean Baker is eating. And like that may not work. And that's where like getting trapped in those circles and that dogma can really work against your health. And people start to evaluate their health based on these diet rules. Like I'm below 10 grams of carbs today. Like I fasted for this amount of time. I didn't eat plants today. So like, I think people just really get lost in that rather than taking a step back and actually evaluating their health based on health metrics, not these like diet rules that are not prescribed for everyone. We certainly did that.
That's so great. And I don't know if it's possible. We're trying to make Sapient. It's not a diet. It's a framework. And so that we're never trapped in. I mean, you described a Sapient diet. What you described fits in the Sapient framework. Like that is perfectly fine. The Sapient framework has an array of ways to eat, and we use things as tools. And you need to use the right tool for the right job. And you don't need a ton of fasting and extreme keto if you're active young women. And also, I want to push back against the carnivore community. I mean, why are we making this out to be a lifetime diet? This was never a lifetime diet for any people in history. We were opportunistic people. We ate what was around us. And maybe, we did do carnivore for 9 months. Great. But I don't think people did carnivore more than 9 months ever in history. So
I want to bring up another point too. The current environment is a lot more stressful than it was hundreds of years ago. We have EMFs, we have 5G, we have trying to make 5 businesses work, feeding our family, feeding our dogs. We experience
there's screens everywhere. There's
exactly
stressors everywhere. Yeah.
And so some people, I think that everyone is affected by stress differently. And so that's going to put you in a separate group. Like there's no way that like my stress level is going to be the same as yours, Brian, for example. And I think that will really dictate what kind of diet approach works for you. If you're an extremely stressed person, fasting all the time is a huge stressor. And so that's just going to dig you deeper into a hole. And so I think that considering stress is another very important piece to this lifestyle. And I like that it's a sapient lifestyle, an approach, not this 4-letter word diet.
Yeah.
One concept I talk about a lot with my patients these days is this idea of acute versus chronic stress. So kind of to break down what you were saying, we have a lot of chronic stressors. Our lives now have way more chronic stress, things that are constantly suppressing us, like the screens, like the, financial worries, lifestyle worries, like stuff that's going on in our,
But even just
political
the
system.
toxic air, you just go outside and the air sucks. It's like that's a stressor.
One way I think about it is managing those chronic stresses by using strategically acute stresses. So if you pile on too many of those acute stresses, like fasting, like,
Lifting or cold
lift,
therapies. If you do
exercise,
too many at
cold,
once, yeah.
heat, you don't want to overdo it. Thank you. You don't want to overdo it. But I think most people in America manage chronic stress with relaxation or with chilling or something. And that doesn't work. Your body just shuts down. You're not using your body. You're eating pizza and ice cream, and you're just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And so I do think that there's this subtle concept of like managing chronic stress with strategic use of acute stressors. And of course you could take that too far, fast way too hard, be way too low carb. You can do that. And I think that there's such a message there is, hey, look how you can use it, but you can overuse it. And so again, coming back to this idea of modifying and individualizing those lifestyle changes to your needs. So if you're training super hard, you probably don't need to be so low carb. But for a lot of people, they're not training very hard.
Exactly.
So a very, very low carb, fasting based approach really works for so many of my patients. But then I have folks that are like you guys, exercising a lot, and we liberalize the diet. They come to me being a huge fan of Saladino and Baker, and I'm talking to them about liberalizing their carbs and just the message that you guys are saying, bringing in these carbohydrates that are healthy or easier to digest, not full of anti-nutrients, and they do so much better. And so there's this idea that I think me and Brian have been putting around is carnivore is the ultimate elimination diet. It is a healing diet. It is a diet that takes away stressors and lets your body sort of reset, if you will. And then as your body finds a balance and a lot of the negative things from the years of a bad diet and lifestyle go away, then you start embracing the concepts of a sapient lifestyle and adding things in that really take you to the next level and also make it sustainable. One of the things I've noticed with carnivore folks is that they get, once they're a year in, 2 years in, unless you're fully obsessed with it, it's not congruent with the day-to-day life. If you have kids, if you have, you live in a big city, and that makes it hard. It's cool to transform yourself, but it's hard to do that for the rest of your life, right? So I do think that that's where we come in. And clearly you guys are on the same page here. It is you start modifying that carnivore approach and you become carnivore-ish or animal-based, and you thoughtfully incorporate other components. And I think that's like a big message people need to hear in the carnivore community, in the keto community, like everywhere, that this is not one thing forever. This is an ever evolving experience.
And I think that our carnivore experience really did help us like heal our gut and give us that reset. I think that if we would have gone from our plant-based keto to where we're eating now, that would have been a recipe for disaster. I don't think that we would have been able to digest and handle the carbs as well as we do now.
We would not be metabolically flexible.
No.
It would mess. It'd be a mess. We also have to, you touched on like people are dealing with their chronic stresses by just relaxing. And we were having this conversation also like the other night. It's like almost by design. So you go to work, you're exhausted, you eat a crappy diet, you come home, all you want to do is relax. You have to rely on medications and you repeat it the next day. You can't really blame these people for not being like, all right, I'm going to go jump in like a cold bath. Like I wouldn't want to be there. I wouldn't want to go to the gym. So it's like getting off that rabbit wheel, hamster wheel.
Is that like lifestyle constructed by design to keep this big farm and big ag?
It all goes back to that.
Is that constructed because those type of people are too tired to research things? They're too tired to question authority, to question current ways. It's just like,
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I will tell you, and sorry, Brian, but real quick, whether it's by design or not, one of the saddest things that I really experienced during my training, especially during the medical school part of it, because it's so rigorous and people put so much pressure on themselves to perform academically, is this complete throwing away of their physical selves. And what I mean is, I watched many people put on not a 15, but a medical school 30 or 40 pounds. And you see it happening because they've overemphasized the academic pursuit, and the only way they can manage their stress, manage studying for God knows how many hours, is eating donuts and this and that, and then taking a nap and relaxing and this and it was a culture, it was a pervasive culture in medical school. It wasn't like, hey, let me study for 4 hours and then go get a little jog in to feel awesome. That was a minority of us. And I made a commitment to myself that I would never let my body fall apart during medical school. And that's, really, in a way, that was the start of my journey. But I don't know if it's by design, but it's so ingrained in even my colleagues that they don't give good recommendations when it comes to their patients. And so I think on some level, starting, us spreading this message in the medical community, and I don't know how to do that because the medical community is disparate and everyone's on their own bubble and own island, have their own organizations. There's no unity to it. But if we can get more physicians on board to understand some of these concepts, I think we can make a dent in healthcare, but I don't yet have a solution for that.
That's what this is for.
Make a film, make a food lies film, and we'll show it around. Now,
There you go.
So we got to end it here. I want you guys to talk a little bit more about the nose to tail aspect. I know you eat a lot of different organs and why that's important.
Yeah. So we are working on I think that you guys, this would hopefully be under your Sapient lifestyle approach. We're working on a cookbook with Dr. Paul Saladino. And it's going to not just be full carnivore, but it's nose to tail eating with low anti-nutrient carb sources. And I think that this approach will be able to reach more people, because I don't think someone the average person is going to buy a book that's just of meat. Mm-hmm. So I think that hopefully that this resource can help a lot of people introduce nose to tail parts into their diet. But go ahead.
The most important thing for us is that it makes this way of eating sustainable, because we obviously care a lot about the environment. And just going to the store and buying steaks, muscle meat, is not as sustainable. You are throwing away a large portion of the cow. And I know somebody's going to make the argument there's only X amount, there's only one tongue in a cow, for example, you're not really getting rid of that much, but you're wasting a lot of valuable nutrients. And then also just things I know you have the nose to tail company and you guys sell those ground with the organ blends. Even just incorporating that could make so much of a nutrient difference in somebody's diet, and swapping out their ground beef for that. We have talked to so many people who just started incorporating 4 ounces of liver per week, and they're feeling so much more energized. I just think it's incredible. And we experience this too.
Well, it goes back to the soil being nutrient deficient, and so much of the food these days is processed food that doesn't have much nutrients. And people forget that the most micronutrient dense part of an animal are the organs, specifically the liver, the heart, the tongue, the kidney. Yeah. And our ancestors prized these for a reason. They had such a high level of wisdom of nutrition. And so it's just such a shame that those just aren't in the grocery store. I don't even know where most of those go.
I don't know. Yeah. Pet food, maybe. I mean, the dogs get the good nutrition sometimes. Right? Yeah.
And so I think that it's not something that you have to include every day. But I think we like to tell people start cycling through different ones, because each organ has its own set of unique micronutrient profiles. We like to incorporate liver a few times a week. You don't have to consume a lot of it to reap the benefits. Our main 3 that we like to cycle through are liver, kidney, and heart. And I think there are pretty easy ways that you can disguise those. For example,
the organ grind is so good.
It's so easy to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other reason is that it's the sustainability wise. So when we start selling meat from our farm, like we want to encourage people to buy the full cow because it's more cost efficient too.
Yeah.
So like if somebody's complaining about the cost, like, well, then eat some other parts that nobody wants to buy.
Yeah.
It averages out. Yeah. If you eat the whole cow, I mean, when nose to tail, we sell the bones, we sell everything because then the price will go down if you eat the whole animal. So that's really great. Yeah. I can't wait to, I'm coming out whenever it happens. I'm out there, you know, maybe, Food Lies too. We can include, some of your message in there, but I guess I'll go out on this note. I don't want to just prop up our sapient diet, our ideas, but I think everyone eventually will end up on a somewhat of a sapient framework in our world, at least, where it just happens naturally. Like, let's not be carnivore forever. Let's not be keto forever. Let's just, I'm just glad that it has a name. I don't want to be like the guy, everyone has to use my word sapient. It's just like, it's supposed to be the most general word. It's like, this is what we are. We're Homo sapiens, and this is what we should eat. And so it's
but
like
it's
a way
different.
It's
different than like the typical like balanced healthy diet, right? And so people always think that like there's only carnivore, keto, and standard American diet. Like there's another option, and if we want to call it sapient, like it's under this sapient structure where it's not like whole grains and like vegetable oils and stuff like that. It's like a completely different framework where you're still getting nutrients in from animal-based products.
But it's the only diet that I know that actually places a strong emphasis on where the food's coming from.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
Well, it is. So, and I'll be honest, I did base it a lot on Weston Price's work and the Weston Price diet. I know you two are fans of Weston Price. And I mean, it's basically just kind of like a low carb version, because mainly we have to treat a lot of people. Dr. Gary, the patients are, 100 pounds overweight. They need basically a low carb version of a Weston Price diet. It's the most nutrient dense, bioavailable form, low anti-nutrient, animal based, and then we can work in some of those whole food carbs later.
Yes. You have to lose the weight first.
What we have to do is look to our past to have a brighter future. And like so much of what we're doing is looking to our ancestry, and we had it figured out. Like nothing we're talking about is new. A lot of the farming practices you guys are going to be employing is nothing new.
Absolutely not.
A lot of the, food concepts are not new. Eating nose to tail is not new. Not putting crappy chemicals on your vegetables is not new. So I do think that we're young people looking to our past and building a brighter future through that. And I think that that's a message that a lot of people will resonate with eventually if they listen to us.
I love it. Thanks for that. And I'll give the Strong Sistas a last message as well.
Okay. Well, we are going to be documenting our entire starting a farm with zero experience from scratch on YouTube. So make sure you guys check us out at strong.sistas on YouTube. We'll also post on Instagram as well, strong.sistas. We're just really looking forward to the opportunity to just hopefully like inspire someone else to do the same. Because like I said in the beginning of the podcast, if we want this like support local, support regenerative agriculture type of model to work, like more people have to go out onto the land. It's not going to work with just a few of us going out there. So that's like one of our main goals is to inspire others to do this with us, and hopefully people can learn along with us. We're definitely going to be sharing our failures as well. So
but for those who can't, just emphasize that it's really important to know where your food's coming from. And kind of exit that like really diet dogma world and just enter like just pushing that message instead that we can all eat differently, but like you should really know where it's coming from.
That's the ultimate unifying message that you can't really go wrong. So
beautiful.
Wow, great stuff. Thanks so much. You guys are inspiration to young women and just everyone. So that's great.
Appreciate that. Thanks so much for having us on, guys.
Thank you, ladies.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Please share this episode with friends and family. Give us a review on iTunes and check out everything else we're doing on sapient.org. And we'll see you next time.